It rained for 3 days straight. Cold sheets of water slid off the steel roofs of Fort Cresswell, an isolated military facility tucked against the northern mountain line, where failed officers, broken systems, and forgotten names were quietly buried in protocol. And that's where she arrived. She didn't speak. She didn't salute. She simply stood still in the rain. Her uniform hung loose on her frame like it didn't belong to her. The hem of her jacket flapped in the wind. Her boots were scuffed. Her duffel bag, soaked and half-zipped, dragged behind her like a body. Clipped to her belt was an outdated analog headset. Not a rifle, not a knife. Just that. Her name tag read PVT Morrow Isla, but within minutes someone called her something else. "Who's the mute?" "She from Signals? Looks like a busted antenna with legs." "Nah, man, that's not a soldier. That's a ghost." The nickname spread like mold, the radio ghost. Sergeant Halverson lit a cigarette and watched her from the steps of the main barracks. "She hasn't blinked once," he muttered. Corporal Mace laughed. "Maybe she's buffering." The others joined in. No one saluted her. No one spoke to her. They just stared, like she wasn't real. That night, they dumped her in the old comms wing, an unused radio control shack built during the Cold War. Dust. Dead spiders. A broken antenna protruded through the cracked ceiling like a spine. There was no heater, no bunkmate, no signal. Still, she said nothing. She became a rumor. Some said she had PTSD and forgot how to speak. Others swore they saw her touch the radar dish during a storm and smile. A few believed she was some kind of failed experiment sent to Fort Cresswell to disappear. She never denied any of it. She just listened to the wind, to the wires, to the silence behind people's words. By the second week, she was officially the base's favorite target. In drills, she was always last in line, given the worst rifle, the wrong maps, assigned solo patrols in the rain with broken gear. "Try not to drown, Ghost!" someone shouted one morning. "If you hear voices in your headset, just wave for help." She never waved, she never laughed, she never failed, but she also never stood out. To the others, that was as good as losing. Even the commanding officer, Captain Reyes, had doubts. "She has no commendations," he said to Halverson. "No active combat history. Redacted logs for 18 months. Nothing but static. Either she's a clerical error, or someone's mistake got dumped on us." Halverson grinned. "Then we treat her like a blank channel." The breaking point came during a live sim electronic warfare exercise. The scenario was simple. A hostile jammer had to be located in simulated enemy territory using radio triangulation. 2 squads, limited comms, time-sensitive targets. Everyone had digital headsets, encrypted maps, and real-time GPS. Isla brought her analog scanner. Manual dial. Wired earpiece. No screen. Corporal Mace gawked. "What is that, a museum piece?" Another recruit added. "She's gonna Morse code her way to victory." They left her behind without a second thought. She didn't chase them. Instead, she crouched beneath a rusted communications relay, looped a wire around its base, and pressed 2 fingers to the metal. She closed her eyes and listened. She didn't report in, didn't call for extraction, didn't send coordinates. That night, Sergeant Halverson stood in front of the whole unit and humiliated her publicly. "Private Morrow, your mission log was blank. Your gear is ancient, your methods are non-existent, and you haven't spoken a single word since the day you arrived. So here's the question, Ghost Girl. Do you even belong in this uniform?" He waited. So did everyone else. But Isla didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't speak. She simply reached into her jacket, pulled out a coiled copper cable, and dropped it on the floor in front of him. Then she turned and walked away, without a single word. At 0200 hours, the base surveillance grid lit up. An unknown signal, pulsing in low-frequency waves, activated every dormant camera and redirected them toward the northern ridge. There, caught in the spotlight of a rotating drone, was Isla, standing motionless in the rain. At her feet, 3 infiltrators, camo-clad, bound, muzzled, dragged out of the forest like sacks of meat. She had found them using wave reflection, tracking their movements through signal distortion and terrain interference. No one had noticed them. No one had heard them. But she had. She hadn't needed a voice, just the right frequency. The storm passed, but the silence afterward was worse. No one spoke to her, but now no one mocked her either. After the incident on the northern ridge, Isla wasn't sent to the mess hall. She wasn't seen in roll call. For 48 hours, she simply vanished. Rumors filled the gap. Maybe Command pulled her out. They say she tracked them using sound shadows. Ghost echo theory. What the hell is ghost echo theory? No one had answers. And Isla wasn't around to explain, because Isla didn't explain anything. But upstairs, Command had questions. In the darkened ops room, Captain Reyes stared at the footage. 3 intruders, neutralized. No shots fired, no support. Just signal pings and low-frequency distortions, patterns so obscure the base's own systems had missed them. And then, her, still, soaked, looking directly into the drone's eye. How the hell did she do that? Reyes asked. No one answered, until Lieutenant Creel, the base's EW specialist, leaned forward and said something strange. She didn't find them by tracking them, sir. She found them by listening to what wasn't supposed to exist. That same night they called her in. She stood in the command tent, dripping with cold rain, eyes straight ahead. Captain Reyes didn't shout. He didn't mock her. He simply looked her in the face and said, "I want to know who trained you." Isla blinked once, slowly. Then she reached into her uniform pocket and placed something on the table, a folded slip of paper, encrypted numeric code, no heading, no signature. Lieutenant Creel picked it up, and his jaw tightened. So this isn't a message. It's a field cipher, Cold War structure, CIA derivative, and it's real. Reyes stared at Isla. Where did you learn this? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and left the tent. Back in the barracks, everything changed. The joke stopped. But now came something colder. Suspicion. The other soldiers gave her wide berth, not out of respect, but fear. She had gone from being the weak link to something unknown. They whispered behind her back. She's probably Black Ops. What if she's not even really Army? You ever hear of a ghost unit before? Like deep listening posts, radio intercept agents? No one could confirm anything, because Isla still didn't speak. She just listened and trained. Harder, quieter, smarter. Every night, she rewired the abandoned signal room in silence. She stripped copper from old devices. She mapped the electromagnetic bleed from the comms tower. She even built a custom wave catcher out of a broken umbrella and a bike chain. When Mace found her one night, tuning the dish with a soldering iron made from 2 spent casings, he froze. "You're building something?" She didn't look at him, didn't say a word, just stared at the signal meter and adjusted the dials until the needle stopped shaking. Mace backed away like he'd seen a ghost for real. Then came the test, a full blackout simulation. EW interference drone jammers and fake hostile agents embedded into the camp to sow confusion. Halverson didn't want her involved. She's not combat tested. He growled. "You think that fancy radio trick last week makes her one of us? But Reyes overruled him. She doesn't need to be one of you. She just needs to win. They dropped Isla blind into the south sector. No support, no radio contact. Her mission? Locate the rogue agent before the other teams did. No comms, no gun, only passive interception. By hour 2, the other squads had broken formation. Their radios failed. Their maps glitched. The jammers did their job. But from the old water tower, Isla sat with her headset on, her fingers slowly adjusting the dial, listening not to the noise, but to the empty spaces between it. She caught the signal distortion near the motor pool, not by hearing a sound, but by sensing the absence of a scheduled pulse. Something was blocking it, and that something was moving. She mapped it, intercepted it, neutralized it. By the time the hostile agent, actually a decorated staff sergeant in disguise, was captured, Isla had him zip-tied on the tarmac, a tracking wire looped around his boot. She'd taken him down using zero force, just signal echo and movement prediction. Captain Reyes watched from the drone feed. Halverson watched from the sidelines, jaw clenched. Mace, for the first time, said nothing at all. But the real moment came later. When the unit was gathered for debrief, Reyes stood before them and said, "One of your own completed the mission using nothing but signal interference and raw frequency mapping. No tech support, no voice, no help. Private Isla Morrow, step forward." She did, slowly, calmly. The entire room was silent, and then someone clapped. One clap, then another, then the room, the same one that mocked her, ignored her, laughed at her, stood and applauded. She didn't bow. She didn't smile. She just nodded once and returned to the shadows. The applause faded, but the questions only grew louder. By now, Fort Cresswell didn't mock Isla Morrow anymore. They respected her, but they didn't understand her. Not yet. They saw what she could do. What they didn't see, couldn't see, was where she had learned it. She still didn't speak, but her actions were beginning to speak louder than any briefing ever could. Captain Reyes, unsettled but intrigued, dug deeper. He pulled clearance codes, called in favors. And after a day of firewalled resistance, one line finally pinged back from an encrypted terminal at Defense Command. Access restricted, OPSIG Venom, priority red, request denied. Reyes stared at the screen. OPSIG Venom, an off-the-books signal operations group. Disavowed, denied in public records. Known only to those with the clearance to fear it. They were ghosts, not on paper, but in airspace. They lived in radio silence, operated behind enemy lines, tracked missile convoys, terrorist cells, and foreign military movements using passive signal bleed and low-frequency atmospheric distortion. Rumor said they had shut down a black market drone factory in Libya, rerouted a missile strike in eastern Ukraine, and once intercepted an assassination broadcast mid-transmission without firing a single bullet. And now, Reyes realized Isla Morrow wasn't just from that unit. She was their last survivor. 2 years prior, OPSIG Venom had gone dark during an operation deep inside the Thar Desert. Official reports claimed the unit was lost to a sandstorm and signal collapse. But one line from the classified record stood out. Operative IM exfiltrated solo, confirmed compromise of all field equipment, carried only analog rig and low-band signal tracker, mission success 92%, survivability 0.9%, debrief incomplete, psychological silence persists. Reyes leaned back. His hands trembled. She never stopped listening. He whispered. Even when everyone else went silent. Back at the outpost, Isla continued her strange rituals. She rewired the old comms room entirely, replaced the analog panel with her own system. built a directional signal trap using old satellite dishes and wire nets, and began mapping foreign broadcasts in the area, waves no one else even noticed. One night, she picked up something strange, a pulse, low, repeating, too clean for weather, too dirty for civilian. She adjusted her scanner, locked it in, translated it using the same cipher she gave Reyes weeks earlier, and what came through was chilling. J9 to Foregate, cleared to approach. 48 hours, device relocated, no U.S. signature detected. She froze. That was military-grade encryption, but it wasn't American. She went straight to Reyes. Didn't knock, didn't wait. She simply walked into his tent and placed the decoded message on his table. For the first time, he didn't ask questions. He just looked her in the eye and said, "Where?" She pointed to the valley beyond the ridge, a blind spot in every drone sweep. What followed was unprecedented. Reyes authorized a zero-noise recon op, built entirely around Isla's frequency tracking. No satellites, no tech, no digital footprints, just signal bounce, static bleed, and electromagnetic mapping. She led the mission herself. Not from the back, from the front. Helmet on, tracker in hand, pulse meter strapped to her wrist like a heartbeat. They moved like shadows, and she moved like a ghost among them, predicting motion by watching the pattern distortions in her receiver, not the terrain. And at 0420 hours she stopped dead, raised a hand, then pointed. Up ahead, buried under camouflage netting, was a signal truck, unmarked, running cold, emitting micropulses every 17 seconds, the exact pattern she had tracked from her shack. Inside were 3 operatives, foreign, armed, recording every inch of Fort Cresswell's emissions. A spy cell. They never had time to resist. Isla had already jammed their backup signal before the team arrived. The takedown was clean, quiet, surgical. By the time the sun rose, 3 enemy agents were in custody. And Fort Cresswell had just thwarted a breach of national electronic defense protocols, all because of her. When the debrief was called, no one laughed this time. No one whispered. Captain Reyes stood in front of the full camp, not with a speech, but with a single truth. There's only one person on this base who understood the threat before it arrived. She's been fighting a war none of you could hear, and she's been winning it, alone. He turned to her. Private Isla Morrow, or whatever your real title is. You're no longer just the radio ghost. He saluted her. She didn't salute back. She simply raised her fingers and tapped once on her headset. Signal confirmed. Message received. Fort Cresswell was no longer quiet. It buzzed, with whispers, with rewired respect, with the kind of tension that only came when something real had been revealed. The soldiers didn't call her Radio Ghost anymore, at least not with mockery. Now they said it like a title, like something earned, something feared. And Isla hadn't changed at all. She still didn't speak, still trained alone, still wandered the perimeter with a hand on the earth, or a wire looped around her wrist, listening for things no one else could hear. But now when she walked past, they stepped aside. The turning point came weeks later. At 0300, a real alert hit the command post. A foreign stealth drone breached the air buffer, a craft running on low-frequency cross-channel pulses. Untrackable, invisible to standard radar. It didn't just fly. It listened. It recorded. The drone's mission: map Fort Cresswell's defenses, backtrace uplinks, inject a silent malware string into NATO's electronic war cloud. The officers scrambled. Comms went down, screens went black. No digital uplink could follow the drone, except one person, Isla Morrow. She was already awake when it happened. In the far corner of the base, in her handmade listening post built from salvaged tech and forgotten metal, she felt the tremor in the wave pattern. A flutter, a distortion too elegant to be natural. She adjusted her receiver. Within seconds, she was building a counterpulse, not to destroy the drone, but to confuse it, scramble its memory without alerting its home base. She needed help, but not just anyone. She needed the same people who once laughed at her. She walked straight into the barracks and pointed to 3 names: Mace, Torres, Gilly. "I need steady hands," she said. Her voice, the first time they'd heard it, was calm, precise, sharp as signal. The room froze. Then Mace stood. "Whatever you need, Ghost." They followed her into the storm. In the old satellite yard behind the base, Isla gave orders like code. "You, anchor the phase loop. Strip the casing. You, pulse this every 9.4 seconds, not 9.5, not 9.3, 9.4. If I say freeze, you stop breathing." No one questioned her. They moved like a unit, her unit, and when the drone finally came overhead, silent and scanning, Isla triggered the signal trap. A pulse wall bloomed in the sky, invisible but lethal to the drone's algorithm. Its sensors flooded with noise, its memory corrupted, its directional path reversed. By the time it flew back to wherever it came from, its mission log was blank, its payload wasted, its target untouched. She hadn't just stopped the attack. She erased the fact that the attack ever happened. At sunrise, the base lit up again. Captain Reyes stood outside her shack, eyes wide, breath fogging in the morning cold. "You didn't just jam it," he said. "You taught it to lie to itself." She nodded once. He stepped back, saluted, then said something the others would repeat for years. "From this day forward, this base listens to you." That afternoon, her name appeared on the mission board. New call sign, Ghost 1 clearance, elevated status, Tactical Intelligence Commander, Signal Recon Unit. She still didn't wear medals, still didn't stand in formation. But now, when the sirens wailed, when systems failed, when the air grew strange and the ground buzzed with things unseen, they all turned toward her. She was no longer their shame. She was their shield. The final scene came quietly. Days later, Isla stood alone on the tower at dusk, headset on, scanner in hand, eyes closed, and behind her, a dozen soldiers silently joined her, one by one. No formation, no order, just presence. They didn't ask what she was hearing. They just stood beside her, listening. Together,